Captain Anxelera slithers to the tactical station, her chromatophores cycling anxiously through deep purples and blues as she reviews the sensor data herself. The numbers don't lie. Power signatures indicative of fusion technology dot the planet's surface. Artificial structures on the moon. Communication arrays on the fourth planet. All impossible. Run comparative analysis with historical records, she orders, her secondary voice sac producing the formal tones of command. Search for anomalies in our trajectory. Verified we haven't somehow approached the wrong system. The bridge crew moves with practiced precision, though Anxelera notices their upper appendages trembling slightly, a cultural tell of deep distress among the Scytheri. A correct reaction. This situation violates everything they understand about evolutionary timescales. Captain, Communications Officer Prizrit's voice crackles over the ship's neural link. We're receiving directed transmissions from the planet's surface. Multiple sources, multiple formats. A pause. Some are using our own encryption protocols. Sir. Current ones. A heavy silence settles over the bridge as the implications sink in. Not ancient Scytheri codes that might have been left behind during the first expedition, but current military-grade encryption that changes on a tri-seasonal basis. Knowledge no non-Scytheri entity should possess. Breach in our database. Offers Security Chief Kovos, already running diagnostics. Interception of our communications. Impossible, counters Science Officer Verdax. We maintain communication silence during deep space travel, and our quantum encryption has just been broken by creatures who couldn't make fire when we last saw them. Anxelera interrupts, making a cultural gesture of acknowledgement toward unpleasant facts. She taps a sequence on her command console, initiating full defensive protocols. Whatever's happening here goes beyond conventional explanations. The main view screen shifts as their ship moves to a higher orbit, revealing the night side of Earth. Unlike most developing worlds, which shows scattered points of light, this planet's darkness is broken by vast, organized lattices of illumination, continent-spanning patterns that pulse with coordinated precision. Visual spectrum analysis indicates the light patterns are changing in response to our orbital adjustments, reports Verdax, her voice hushed. They're tracking us, and I believe they're communicating. Can you decode it? Working on it now, but... The science officer freezes, staring at her display. Captain, the pattern. It's not just random signals. It's a detailed schematic of our ship. They're sending us back an image of ourselves. Anxelera feels her inner membranes constrict with ancestral fear. The last time their species encountered a civilization capable of such technological feats, the resulting conflict nearly destroyed both cultures. She makes a decision. Prepare a secure channel. If they know so much about us already, diplomatic engagement is our safest option. Before she can give the order, every display on the bridge simultaneously flickers and resolves to the same image. A human female, her features composed in what their cultural database identifies as a gesture of welcome. When she speaks, it's in flawless high Scytheri, with the precise dialectical inflections of the captain's own hatching grounds. Greetings, children of the far stars. Welcome back to Earth. We've been waiting for your return for quite some time. Shall we talk about what your ancestors did to ours? The diplomatic chamber aboard the Endless Horizon hums with tension as Captain Anxelera convenes an emergency council. The holographic message from Earth plays on repeat, the humans' perfect pronunciation of their sacred greeting phrases sending ripples of distress through the assembled officers. The human referenced evolutionary genetic protocols. Science Officer Verdax notes, her exoskeleton flushed with the deep indigo of scientific fascination mingled with dread. Such terminology doesn't appear in our standard research logs from that period. Because it wasn't standard research, interjects elder historian Kizivek, his ancient frame barely visible beneath ceremonial robes. The council falls silent. The presence of a ship elder at a tactical meeting is unprecedented. The human speaks of classified operations. Kizivek activates his personal data crystal, bypassing the ship's security with ancestral override codes. 500 millennia ago, certain experimental programs were conducted without full council approval. Programs investigating accelerated evolutionary potential in promising species. Security Chief Kivos slams his appendage against the table. You experimented on primitives. Violated the prime directive of non-interference. This is ancient history, interrupts the elder, his secondary eyes narrowing, and apparently not as forgotten as we believed. The view screen shifts to real-time footage of New Zealand, the designated landing coordinates. Instead of primitive settlements, high-resolution scans reveal a facility of stunning sophistication, architecture that somehow incorporates living biological components with advanced alloys unknown to Sktheri metallurgy. More disturbing still are the atmospheric readings. The landing zone has been terraformed to precisely match our homeworld's atmosphere, reports environmental specialist Gnithel, mandibles clicking nervously, down to trace gas ratios that we ourselves only identified 2 centuries ago. They'd prepared for us, Ancillera concludes, not just recently. They'd been preparing for centuries. The implications chill the council chamber. These humans haven't merely detected their arrival. They've anticipated it, planned for it, across generations. The question is, with what intent? I'll lead the landing party, Ancillera decides, silencing Kivos's immediate objection with a gesture. If these humans wanted to harm us, they could have attempted it already. Their technology clearly gives them that capability. We should at least send automated probes first, urges Kivos. Verdax shakes her head, calling up sensor readings. Observe these quantum fluctuations around their facility. I believe they've established some form of consciousness-responsive field. It might reject non-sentient technology. As preparations for landing commence, Ancillera retreats to her private chamber, initiating a direct neural link to the ship's secure archives. She searches the name the human had used, Genetic Uplift Protocol, finding only heavily redacted files requiring clearance beyond her station. A soft chime announces an incoming transmission, private channel, source unidentified. When she accepts, a simple text message appears. Your ancestors came as scientists but left as gods. We remember their faces, their names, their genetic sequences. We remember what they took from us and what they left behind. The memory is in our cells, Captain. We are their legacy, whether they intended it or not. The message vanishes before Ancillera can trace it, leaving her alone with the growing certainty that this mission has been compromised before it even began, not by external forces, but by her own civilization's forgotten actions. The floating platform descends smoothly through the atmosphere, bringing the landing party and their human hosts to a sprawling coastal complex nestled between mountains and sea. Captain Ancillera notices how the facilities seem to grow from the landscape rather than imposing upon it, living architecture that breathes and adjusts to its surroundings. Your structures, she remarks to Dr. Chen, gesturing with her upper appendages. They're partially sentient. Semi-conscious architecture, Dr. Chen confirms. Buildings that heal themselves, regulate their own environments, and evolve to meet changing needs. An early adaptation of Sktheri biotechnology principles we found encoded in our mitochondrial memory. Inside the complex, the aliens discover spaces that somehow manage to accommodate both human and Sktheri ergonomic requirements simultaneously. The lighting adjusts automatically to the specific wavelength preferences of each individual present, a subtle technological feat that requires real-time biological scanning. You mentioned genetic uplift protocols. Navigator Kistel ventures cautiously as they enter a vast circular chamber. Our records show no such. Your public records don't, interrupts a tall, dark-skinned human male who introduces himself as Dr. Adebayo, Earth's historical continuity director. But we have them, complete and unredacted. He activates a wall-sized display showing ancient Sktheri genetic research diagrams, annotated in a script Ancillera recognizes with shock. The private scientific notation of the long-extinct Ikthari clan. geneticists whose controversial research was purged from official records after the Third Reformation. The Ictheri were genetic pioneers, Dr. Adebayo continues, as if lecturing students. Their work was centuries ahead of mainstream Ictheri science. When political pressure forced them underground, they sought remote testing grounds, primitive worlds where they could conduct experiments without oversight. Science officer Vrudax bristles, her chromatophores flashing morning colors. These claims are outrageous. The Ictheri were philosophers, not renegade geneticists. Dr. Chen completes the sentence. She approaches Vrudax directly. Your own tertiary genome carries Ictheri markers, science officer. Specifically, the Tuzkreth bloodline, the clan's leading researchers. The chamber falls silent. Such genetic information isn't merely private. It's sacred knowledge among Ictheri, known only to immediate family and spiritual guides. How could you possibly? Vrudax begins, then stops, comprehension dawning in her compound eyes. Because we remember, says Dr. Chen softly. Not historically, not culturally, genetically. The Ictheri didn't just study early humans. They encoded their own genetic memories into our DNA, a living backup of their knowledge, embedded in a species they assumed would remain primitive for millions of years. She turns to Captain Ancillera. They hid their most revolutionary discoveries inside us, a biological time capsule to be recovered once the political climate on your world changed. But they miscalculated. The genetic modifications accelerated our cognitive evolution exponentially. We began accessing the embedded knowledge thousands of generations ahead of schedule. Dr. Chen leads them deeper into the facility, where a final display activates, a genetic family tree connecting ancient Ictheri researchers to the captain's own lineage. Your ancestor, Arxelara, led the final expedition before contact was severed, Dr. Chen explains. She left something behind when the research team departed. Something personal. She reaches into a small containment field, removing an object that makes Ancillera's breath catch, a ceremonial clan marker, identical to the one she carries in her personal quarters, passed down through 16 generations. Now, Dr. Chen says, offering the ancient artifact to the stunned captain, shall we discuss what your people intended us to become, and what we've become instead? The underground facility extends deeper than should be physically possible, defying this Ictheri's understanding of structural engineering. As they descend through transparent tubes, Captain Ancillera realizes they're traveling through the planet's crust at speeds that should generate catastrophic heat, yet the surrounding material remains cool to thermal imaging. Dimensional phasing, Dr. Chen explains, noticing the captain's confusion. The elevator exists partially in adjacent quantum states, allowing travel through rather than against matter. The tube opens into a vast spherical chamber that draws involuntary clicks of astonishment from the aliens. They stand at the edge of what appears to be a miniature galaxy, swirling points of light representing DNA sequences, connected by glowing strands of information pathways. The Ictheri Genome Repository, announces Dr. Sato, a geneticist who joins their group. What your ancestors left inside us, mapped and reconstructed over generations. At a gesture from Dr. Chen, the swirling data cloud shifts, focusing on a specific sequence that pulses with unusual intensity. Project Phoenix, she says, the centerpiece of their work, not just knowledge storage, directed evolutionary acceleration. She manipulates the display, revealing cascading genetic modifications that spread across human chromosomal structures. They designed a self-evolving system that would activate specific cognitive and physiological enhancements as our brains develop the capacity to process them. Security Officer Tkevos steps forward aggressively. This violates every principle of xenobiological ethics. The Council would never. The Council wasn't informed, interrupts an elderly human who enters from a side chamber. His appearance silences the room, not because of any authority he projects, but because of his startling physical characteristics. His eyes, with vertical pupils and multifaceted irises, are distinctly non-human. Genetic expression test subject. Dr. Chen explains. Mr. Patel volunteered to activate dormant Sc-theory physiological traits encoded in his lineage. We carry fragments of your species within us, Mr. Patel says, his voice carrying the unmistakable dual-toned resonance of Sc-theory speech. Not just your knowledge, but your biological potential. Science Officer Verdax approaches the human, her scientific curiosity overcoming cultural shock. These adaptations shouldn't be possible without complete genetic restructuring. The protein folding alone would be impossible according to conventional genetics, agrees Dr. Sato. But the Sc-theory weren't working with conventional genetics. They were pursuing evolutionary pathways that their own civilization had abandoned. The display shifts again, revealing the historical timeline connecting the Sc-theory experiments with human developmental leaps. Cave paintings appearing shortly after the first genetic modifications, followed by accelerated tool development, agriculture, and eventually the exponential technological growth of recent millennia. We didn't just develop faster, Dr. Chen explains. We developed differently. The Sc-theory sequences didn't simply enhance our existing capabilities, they introduced entirely new cognitive frameworks, ways of processing information, perceiving reality, and conceptualizing technology that no naturally evolving species would develop. Captain Ancillera stares at a final display showing human and Sc-theory DNA strands intertwined in a complex dance of shared information. You're saying the Sc-theory didn't just modify you. They created a hybrid consciousness. More accurate to say they created an entirely new evolutionary branch. Mr. Patel replies, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the swirling genetic displays. Neither human nor Sc-theory, but something that carries elements of both, capable of processing reality through multiple cognitive frameworks simultaneously. He turns to face the captain directly. They created us as an experiment, Captain Ancillera. The question now is, do you consider that experiment a success or a failure? The Martian Research Complex reveals its true nature as the human guides lead the Sc-theory delegation through seemingly ordinary corridors that suddenly open into vast underground caverns. Here, impossible machines pulse with energies that make the alien sensory organs recoil in confusion. Neural quantum interfaces, explains Dr. Rajiv Mehta, leading them past a spherical device where humans wearing minimal contact points manipulate vast energy fields through slight changes in their brainwave patterns. We discovered that consciousness itself is a quantum phenomenon that can directly influence probability waves when properly amplified. Chief researcher Kaman approaches a young human technician who sits cross-legged before a hovering matrix of light, eyes closed in deep concentration. What is she doing? The scientist asks, noting how the energy patterns shift in harmony with the human's breathing rhythms. Programming, replies Dr. Mehta, or more accurately, communing with the quantum substrate. Traditional coding proved too limiting for truly advanced systems. Why here is directly structuring potential realities through focused consciousness. The technician opens her eyes, noticing their presence. Your approach was almost there, she says to Chuman with unexpected familiarity. The Sc-theory consciousness manipulation theories from your sixth Enlightenment period came remarkably close. You just needed to abandon the idea that mathematics was the fundamental language of reality. Navigator Keistel's appendages tremble as he examines schematic representations of human propulsion systems. These drive configurations violate core principles of unified field theory. They should tear themselves apart at the quantum level. They would, agrees a human engineer, if we approached spacetime as a fixed constant rather than a malleable medium. Your scientists theorized that consciousness might influence quantum states, but never followed the implications to their logical conclusion, that reality itself is partially consciousness-dependent. The tour continues through manufacturing facilities where humans manipulate matter at the subatomic level, rearranging molecular bonds through directed thought amplified by subtle machines. In one chamber, a group of children play what appears to be a simple game. their laughter causing crystalline structures to form in patterns that correspond to mathematical solutions to complex equations. "You've weaponized intuition," murmurs security officer to Kavos, watching the children with a mixture of awe and deep unease. "We prefer harnessed over weaponized," corrects Dr. Chen. The Ik theory's most brilliant insight was recognizing that intuition, the ability to make conceptual leaps without fully understanding the intermediate steps, could be genetically enhanced. While your civilization pursued pure logic and methodical advancement, we developed the ability to grasp solutions holistically. The final demonstration occurs in a spherical chamber where a single human sits at the center of concentric rings of light. As the Scatheri watch, the human conductor orchestrates what Dr. Chen describes as probability harmonics, directly manipulating quantum probabilities to solve engineering problems deemed theoretically unsolvable. "Your approach to the universe is architectural," Dr. Medet explains. "You build on established principles, methodically advancing through careful experimentation. Our approach is more," he pauses, searching for the right word, "conversational. We don't just observe and manipulate reality. We negotiate with it." Captain Ancilera watches as the human conductor completes a particularly complex manipulation, causing the surrounding energy fields to crystallize momentarily into a perfect solution for what she recognizes as a 7-dimensional energy transfer problem, something Scatheri scientists have been working on for centuries. "And this is how you achieve faster-than-light travel," she states, the implications finally becoming clear. Dr. Chen smiles. "That's just the beginning. Would you like to see where this approach has taken us?" The quantum horizon accelerates away from Mars, yet the Scatheri delegation feels no inertia, no sense of movement at all. Captain Ancilera watches in fascination as the human pilots maintain their strange meditative harmony, their neural implants pulsing in synchronized patterns. "Traditional spaceflight relies on overcoming physical constants," explains Captain Okafor as she joins the aliens on the observation deck. "Force against force, energy against resistance. Our approach acknowledges that spacetime itself responds to consciousness, particularly to certain harmonic patterns of thought." Through the viewport, the stars blur momentarily before resolving into an entirely different configuration. A blue-green world hangs before them, surrounded by an intricate network of orbital structures that spiral outward in fractal patterns. "Kepler 438, announces Captain Okafor, though the colonists call it New Eden. Security Officer Tkavos scans the local space with his personal instruments. "This is impossible," he mutters. "We're over 470 light-years from Earth. The transit took less than 3 minutes. It would be impossible if we traveled through space," agrees Captain Okafor. "We don't. We temporarily harmonize specific locations in spacetime, creating what you might call a consciousness bridge between them. A small transport vessel delivers them to the planet's surface, where the Scatheri encounter something entirely unexpected, a thriving ecosystem that blends Earth biology with completely alien life forms. This world had its own evolutionary path," explains Dr. Imani Okoro, the colony's chief xenobiologist. "Rather than terraform it to Earth standards, we genetically modified ourselves to co-evolve with the native ecosystem. The aliens observe humans with subtle biological adaptations, slightly altered respiratory systems, modified skin pigmentation, enhanced night vision, walking among indigenous creatures that show signs of accelerated evolution themselves. Mutual adaptation." Dr. Okoro continues, leading them through gardens where Earth plants grow in symbiotic relationships with alien flora. "We introduced minimal changes to both ourselves and selected native species, creating stable evolutionary partnerships." Chief Researcher Jkemon pauses before a structure that appears to be a temple of some kind, its architecture blending human design elements with distinctly Scatheri religious motifs. "This is based on the Temple of Eternal Recursion on our homeworld," he says, tracing familiar patterns in the stonework. "A sacred site not included in any scientific database. How could you possibly know its design?" A human priest emerges from the temple, his robes bearing symbols that make the Scytheri scientists recoil in shock. Sacred mathematical formulations from their most esoteric religious texts. The Scytheri encoded everything, the priest explains. Not just scientific knowledge, but cultural and spiritual information as well. When we began deciphering the embedded memories, we discovered that Scytheri mathematics and spirituality are intrinsically linked, something your modern civilization seems to have forgotten. He gestures to the temple's central chamber, where a three-dimensional representation of an equation hovers in space, a formula that the Scytheri recognize as the theoretical basis for their most sacred concept, the mathematical proof of soul continuity. This equation appeared in human dreams for generations before we understood its significance, the priest continues. Your ancestors believed it represented the mathematical proof that consciousness transcends physical form. We discovered it could also be applied to transcend spacetime itself. Captain Ancillera stares at the equation, one that modern Scytheri scientists have dismissed as mystical nonsense, yet these humans have somehow implemented it as functional technology. You turned our most sacred spiritual concept into a propulsion system, she whispers, mandibles clicking in cultural distress. Not just propulsion, corrects Captain Okafor gently. The foundation of our understanding of reality itself. Your ancestors encoded their deepest wisdom in our DNA, not expecting us to use it so soon, perhaps, but clearly intending for it to be used. The journey back to Earth transpires in another eye blink, but this time Captain Ancillera observes the transition more carefully, noting how the human pilot's neural synchronization creates resonance patterns that momentarily connect disparate regions of spacetime. The technology defies conventional understanding, yet operates with undeniable precision. In the ship's central observatory, Dr. Chen activates a holographic display unlike anything the Scytheri have seen before, a three-dimensional map of the galaxy that somehow conveys more information than should be visually possible, operating on multiple perceptual layers simultaneously. This is our Galactic Awareness Network, she explains, a real-time consciousness-linked mapping system that monitors quantum entanglement patterns across interstellar distances. The display zooms to reveal a region of space the aliens immediately recognize, the Deneb sector, home to the Hive Consciousness, one of the Confederation's oldest members. Impossibly detailed information flows across the display, showing Hive fleet movements, communication patterns, and even cultural data that should be inaccessible to outside observation. You've been spying on the Confederation, Security Officer Tkivos states flatly, his defensive appendages instinctively extending. We prefer observing, corrects Ambassador Julian Cosi, who joins them in the observatory. Monitoring potential allies and threats is simply pragmatic for a young species. She manipulates the display to reveal observation posts strategically positioned near major Confederation worlds, undetectable stations utilizing technologies that make the Scytheri's most advanced stealth systems seem primitive by comparison. 73 years ago, we detected our first evidence of the Confederation. The ambassador continues, a damaged Yithlar survey vessel that strayed into our solar system. Rather than announcing ourselves immediately, we chose to study the wider galactic political landscape first. The display shifts to show first contact scenarios that humans have simulated, thousands of potential diplomatic, cultural, and unfortunately, military outcomes of revealing themselves to the wider galactic community. The simulations consistently showed that our rate of development would be perceived as threatening, explains Dr. Chen. Species that evolve over millions of years tend to view rapid advancement as inherently destabilizing. Captain Ancillera watches a particularly disturbing simulation where a human delegation is immediately quarantined by the Confederation Council, followed by debates about genetic correction to slow human development to acceptable parameters. These outcomes aren't just theoretical, Ambassador Nkosi adds quietly. We've observed similar scenarios playing out with other rapidly advancing species. The Voth of Sector 9326 were subjected to forced neural dampening after developing faster-than-expected quantum technologies. Chief Researcher Jgamon clicks his mandibles in distress. The Confederation would never. He stops himself, the evidence before him contradicting his automatic defense. Most Confederation citizens would never approve such measures. The ambassador acknowledges, but most aren't informed of them. The Galactic stability protocols aren't public knowledge. Dr. Chen adjusts the display once more, revealing something that makes even the stoic security officer Tkivos step back in alarm. A perfect reproduction of the Confederation Council's most restricted archives, including security protocols that even the captain doesn't have clearance to know exist. "We didn't set out to become intelligence gatherers," Dr. Chen says softly. "But when we realized the potential reception awaiting us, we needed to understand exactly what we were facing." Captain Ancillera stares at the classified information floating before her, secrets her own people have kept from each other, now in the hands of a species they didn't even know existed until recently. "And yet," she says carefully, "despite knowing all this, you've chosen to reveal yourselves to us now. Why?" The Antarctic facility humbles even the Sktheri's advanced understanding of engineering. Buried 3 kilometers beneath the ice, the vast spherical chamber houses technology beyond anything they've previously encountered. A quantum observatory that somehow monitors regions of space thousands of light years distant without the delay of electromagnetic transmission. "We call it the Abyssal Eye," Dr. Chen explains as technicians activate the main system. It uses quantum entanglement chains to observe distant regions in real time, without the limitations of light speed. The chamber darkens as the display activates, filling the space with a 3-dimensional representation of the galactic rim. At first, the aliens see nothing unusual, just the expected stellar distribution of the outer spiral arm. Then Dr. Chen adjusts the parameters, shifting to what she calls probability visualization, and the true picture emerges. Moving through the darkness between stars are vast, shadow-like entities, or perhaps more accurately, absences of probability. Where normal space teems with quantum potential, these regions exhibit a terrifying nothingness that makes the Sktheri's sensory organs recoil in primitive fear. "We first detected them 73 years ago," explains Admiral Helena Voigt, Earth's defense coordinator. "Initially, we thought they were observational anomalies, regions where our quantum monitoring systems simply failed. Then we realized that they were moving, purposefully." She manipulates the display to show the entity's path across multiple star systems. In their wake, planets once teeming with quantum activity, the signature of life and civilization, go dark, not destroyed, but somehow emptied. "Your legends call them the Void Heralds," Dr. Chen says quietly. "Ancient texts in our genetic memory referred to them as those who unmake potential. We believe they're entities that feed on possibility itself, consuming the quantum potential of living systems." Security Officer Tkivos shifts uncomfortably. "These are myths from our pre-scientific era, tales to frighten younglings. Then your ancestors encoded children's stories in our DNA alongside advanced physics and genetic engineering," Admiral Voigt replies, her tone making clear her skepticism. "These entities are real, and they're accelerating toward Confederation space." The display shifts again, showing mathematical projections of the entity's movements, trajectories that will bring them to inhabited worlds within centuries, not millennia as the Confederation's limited long-range scans had estimated. "Your civilization has encountered them before," Dr. Chen continues. "References in our genetic memory suggest a previous incursion nearly destroyed your ancient empire. The solution, then, was a unified consciousness response, what your texts call the Great Harmony." Captain Ancillera's mandibles click in surprise. The Great Harmony is a religious concept, not historical fact. A mythical time when all Sktheri supposedly joined in mental unity to overcome a cosmic challenge. Myths often encode historical truths, responds an elderly woman who enters the chamber. Her neural implants are more extensive than any human this Catheri have yet encountered, glowing with subtle patterns that somehow resonate with the quantum display. I am Dr. Eleanor Chen Sr. She introduces herself. First-generation recipient of the complete Icthuri memory integration protocol. She approaches the display, and at her mental command, it shifts to show ancient Icthuri defense networks arrayed against similar void entities. Your ancestors beat them back once through unified consciousness amplification, the very technology they embedded in our DNA. The elder Dr. Chen turns to Captain Angsulara, her eyes reflecting the swirling quantum data. We're not asking to join your confederation as supplicants or equals. We're offering to be what your ancestors designed us to be, living weapons against an enemy they knew would return. We are your evolutionary insurance policy, Captain. And it's time to cash in.